which doesn't mean that you have a duty to go out and make people different. But what I'm saying is if you don't live out loud, as it were, if you do all your spiritual life not only in your head, but in your home, behind closed doors, as it were, under a plain brown wrapper, you're not doing the job. So I'm going to give you 4 very brief stories out of my own experience for several reasons. One, I don't need my permission to tell you my stories. Second, because they are trivial stories, they are not momentous, which means they're probably things that you have done or would do or could do. And also because you need a puny example, and I'm a pretty puny guy. Because I don't want you to try to be heroic. I want you just to be human. So I'm going to start with something. A few years ago, I ran into a sermon by a very young colleague, very promising young woman, who pointed out that the way we deliver food to the supermarkets has become so industrialized that it takes, I'm trying to remember the figure correctly, upwards of 80 gallons of petroleum to bring 1 pound of meat to the marketplace. How does that happen? Well, you can read all about it. But her counsel was, eat less stuff that has to come a long way. Eat more locally made things. Eat more organic things. Her counsel was spend $10 a week on locally grown or organic goods. And I said, I can do that. That's easy. And so I did that. And then I read Michael Pollan's book, The Omnivore's Dilemma. And boy, is it. You begin to think really hard about where your food comes from and why you eat it. One of the things he advised ultimately is, well, he put it in 7 words. Here's how one should eat. Eat food. Not too much. Mostly plants. And his point was when he says eat food, his measure is if your mother wouldn't recognize it, it's not food. If your grandmother wouldn't recognize it, it's not food. The further you are from the ground, the more processed it is. He said not too much. Have you seen the size of portions these days? Astonishing. And we wonder why there are obese people. And he said, lastly, mostly plants. Well, I've tried to take that to heart. I'm not entirely successful, but at this point I am almost entirely vegetarian. And I say that not because I don't like a steak. Steaks can be yummy. It's because I know at this point that I have a choice. And that choice means that I can choose to graze at the top of the food chain or at the bottom, at the expensive petroleum-fueled end or at the less expensive homegrown end. And I'm thinking, I can do better. I was liberated in my mind by a truth I did not know that changed me the way I thought about my relationship to myself, which yielded a change in my life. And here's where I take the next step. I'm telling you about it. And some of you are saying, well, that's my flaky minister for you. And some of you are saying, cool. And some of you are saying, what does all this mean? Well, what if I were to suggest to you that, and I'm going to suggest this to you, and then I'll tell you what happened, because I did actually suggest this. What if I were to suggest to you that whenever we do meals here at Fountain Street Church, they should be vegetarian? And some of you are saying, wait a minute. I'm not a vegetarian. You're not going to force me to be vegetarian, which is what someone told me when I suggested this. I said, I'm not forcing you to be a vegetarian. I'm saying, don't eat meat here. You can kill a cow on the street as far as I'm concerned. What if we were to practice a more locavore, more organic, less meat-dependent food culture just at Fountain Street Church? And people felt a little challenged by that, and they got angry at me. You can't tell me what to do, because remember, Fountain Street Church is the church of you're not the boss of me. But then, I'm thinking of Paul. Remember that reading from Paul? You thought, what the blazes was that all about? And he was advising intelligent, enlightened people who knew the truth, meaning the Christian truth, not to abuse their knowledge. But they did in fact know that the meat given to idols was not, polluted. They could eat it. His point was that we must behave as a community, not just as individuals. That we cannot make individual choices, no matter how noble they are, if they distract, harm, or in some way impede others who are still struggling to find their way. In other words, it is not enough that I be better in my way and eat less meat or no meat. It is better for communities, neighborhoods, churches to be present to these realities. It's better for groups to take on the challenge of respectable and responsible food. And that does mean that friendships will be hard. It does mean that people will say, you're forcing me to do something, which is not true, but it's forcing them to make a choice, which is true. Agitation, as I've pointed out, about liberation and animation is costly. I don't spend as much money on food, but I don't eat any meat either. I don't get that succulent fillet anymore. When I see the bacon bits, I say, get thee behind me, Satan. And that's not, again, because I don't like it. It's because it's the right thing to do. When you do the right thing, it will cost you something probably you enjoy. But that's the price of doing the right thing. Another story to give you. Until we moved here, my wife and I lived a very good clergy life, which means we didn't have a lot of money, so we were very frugal, and we only husbanded a few pennies. And then you folks offered me a job, and I got a real paycheck. What a gas that's been. I love that. And our parents, in departing the earth, left a little bit behind so that we can make sure our children are provided for. So we now have some latitude we didn't before. And we thought, what should we do with this? Well, now, I want you to ask yourself, if you had extra money, where would you spend it? Don't tell me, but you already know where you'd go or what you'd do. Wendy and I, we looked around and said, let's tithe. We have always felt like we had not been able to give away as much as we wanted. We always said, I wish we could do more. But we were frightened that we wouldn't be able to afford it. So now we give 10% of our gross income away every year, a minimum. Last year it was more like 13%. And you know something? I've discovered that I can't do everything I want, but I can do almost everything I want anyway. And so I've decided that that's important to us. And we've decided that that's an important thing for us to do, even though it means we will probably not buy certain things as soon as we might. We're not doing without. We have just made that a priority. And now I've told you, and some of you are already thinking, geez, he's going to come to my house and ask me to raise my pledge. No, I'm not. You know if you're giving enough. If you are uneasy in your heart, that means you know you're not. But that's your struggle, not mine. The giving of 10% has to be something you believe is important enough to put aside. And the question I would ask you, as all religions do, is to what extent can we be good without doing good? I know we should all enjoy a measure of prosperity, and we should enjoy prosperity. That is something we want in our lives. And if personal success and prosperity are of high value to you, then using your resources is quite logical. But again, if you can be good, can you be good without doing good? Can you feel good even without doing good? Thoreau, the great sage of Concord, put it this way: be not simply good, but good for something. Look at where your resources go. Do they add net value to the earth? Are you a zero-sum kind of person who puts in exactly as much as you take out? Or are you adding, or are you in fact diminishing? And you have to be the one to do that calculus. You really have to do that. And it's agitating. I'm hoping it's agitating when I ask that question. If you're comfortable, then you're probably more generous than you think, or way less generous than you know.